Howdy, howdy. Just make sure we hit that thumbs up, please. Alright, so we got 2 people in chat, 3 thumbs up. Hey, what's happening, Murphys? So hopefully we'll have time for at least two stories here. I know they close up here at the library at 5 o'clock. All right, folks, let's leave some comments in the comment section here so I know who's in chat. See 4 people and 4 thumbs up. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. All right, I guess we'll go ahead and get into it. At least we'll have at least an hour, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Alrighty. This is about the Wham Paymaster robbery, the Cattleman's Caper. In the dim light of dawn, 13-year-old Andy Carlson watched wide-eyed as the men tied rags over their horse's mouth to muffle the snorts and whinnies that would surely give them away. For several days, the gang had been living in a stifling hot cave, surviving on sardines and deviled ham as they erected mattresses above the road that led from Fort Grant to Fort Thomas in southeastern Arizona. This afternoon, the Army paymaster would come down this road carrying a payroll close to $30,000. The men had no intention of letting him get to Fort Thomas with his bounty. Young Andy, who would stay behind and hold the horses during the upcoming battle, remembered the events of May 11th, 1889, the rest of his life, and he often bragged of his involvement in the greatest military robbery in Arizona history. Hey, what's up, Cammed Up Caveman? What's up? Welcome, guys. Some of the man-made barricades along the bridge were so large that 5 or 6 men could hide behind them. Towering sporadic boulders added additional protection. To give the illusion of even more gunpowder on the hilltop, the men carved yucca stalks to look like rifles and positioned them along the breastworks aimed at the road below. Their final task was to push a huge boulder across the road to block the soldiers' march to Fort Thomas. At least a dozen men may have been on the hilltop that warm May day, but only 7 local cattlemen would be tried for the crime. Chauncey Gilbert Webb Jr., known as Gilbert, was the likely ringleader of the holdup gang. At age 53, he was certainly the oldest participant. He and his son ran the Webb Cattle Company along with several other businesses near the Mormon community of Pima. Gilbert was a leader in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, even though an affair with a local widow caused his name to be stricken from church rolls. Gilbert fell on hard times during the late 1800s and was forced to sell many of his holdings. At the time of the payroll robbery, he was suspected of illegal cattle branding. At least one of his sons, Wilford, accompanied his father into the encampment above the road to Fort Thomas. Mark E. Cunningham also owned a ranch and was eagerly wooing a local gal. He had served as Graham County Deputy Sheriff but lost his bid for sheriff in 1888. His proclivity for gambling may have led to his desire to acquire the Army payroll. Brothers Lyman and Warren Follett, who had a spread nearby, were fingered as part of the robbery gang, along with David Rogers and Thomas Norman Lamb, cowhands on the Webb Ranch. What's up, Brillis? All these men had ties to the Mormon Church except for the gambler, Mark Cunningham. Mormons had settled the thriving community of Pima along the Gila River in 1879. By the late 1800s, however, ranchers saw their livelihoods shriveling under the desert sun and government taxes. Eastern factions controlled Arizona's purse strings, and the glut of military posts in the territory meant thousands of dollars that could have helped desperate ranchers went into military coffers instead. Discontent was also brewing in religious sectors. Non-Mormons resented the power of the Mormon Church, particularly its influence in local elections. On the other hand, Mormons bristled under the 1882 Edmunds Act, which banned plural marriages and gave U.S. Marshals authority to arrest those who continued to practice polygamy. Some or all of these factors may have played a part in the decision of a handful of local cattlemen to seize the Army payroll, a recompense for the financial, political, and religious hardships they were encountering. And this is a reenactment photo the day after the Wham Paymaster robbery. As you can see, there's somebody standing up here on the rocks, and there's the wagon with the payload on it. There's another person over here. On May 1889, Major Joseph Washington Wham set out from Tucson on his usual pay run. He had been an Army paymaster for over 10 years, handling innumerable payrolls for the military. He and his retinue stopped first at Fort Huachuca, then continued on to Fort Bowie. Oh, well, here we go. Check this out. They spent the night in Wilcox, where Wham picked up more funds waiting for the Wilcox Railroad Depot. Money necessary for the payrolls at Fort Grant, Thomas and Apache, and Camp San Carlos. And that depot is just straight up the road here, past the stoplight and the first right. And the Wilcox Depot is right there. Man, I want to go over there and just do a live stream, you know. I know they won't mind it over there, but you know, it'd be something cool to do. Because at that Wilcox Depot, there was a person that used to stay there, and he had a family that stayed with him there back in the day when it was up and running. And he had I guess his kids were sleeping upstairs or something. He would like hit the ceiling with the broom, and so there's marks from the broom up on the ceiling right there. Let's continue. A contingent of 12 Buffalo soldiers from the 10th Cavalry and 24th Infantry of Fort Grant relieved Major Wham's initial escort, and he arrived at Fort Grant on May 10th without incident. Wham and his men started for Fort Thomas on Saturday morning. May 11th, a run of about 45 miles, Major Wham's Army ambulance led the way while the Buffalo soldiers rode in a second wagon. The heavy oak strongbox in Major Wham's ambulance marked U.S. Treasury, contained $28,345.10 in gold and silver coins. About 15 miles from Pima, the two wagons approached a hill descending into Cottonwood Wash, a dry and rocky arroyo. Major Wham's driver led the way, cautiously guiding his team of 6 mules down the steep hill. The soldiers lightened the load in the second wagon by getting out and walking. Just as the road narrowed, Major Wham's driver pulled to a sharp halt. In front of him, a massive boulder blocked his way. Chances are it was Wilfred Webb and Mark Cunningham who boldly stood atop the bluff and aimed at the unsuspecting soldiers. As they began firing, Ed Follett rose up and shot the lead mule attached to the first wagon. 2 more mules from the second wagon were dead within seconds. Chaos and Bedlam took over the reins as the remaining burros reared and brayed, struggling to get out of harm's way. Caught in a web of tangled harnesses, the mules dragged the wagons along with their dead companions off the trail. From atop the ridge, a hailstorm of bullets rained down upon the military entourage. Some say Follett threw a handful of cartridges into a fire behind one of the boulders to give the illusion that hundreds of men were on the rim. The bandits freely scampered from one protective haven to the next, firing down on the small army at will. When one duck recovered to reload, another popped up, sending a firestorm of lead careening down the hillside. The men seemed to enjoy their game of cowboys versus cavalry, not even bothering to conceal their identities. One mistake they did make was believing the Buffalo soldiers would not fight back. The bandits held the white man's belief that black soldiers would panic and run before they would fight. The soldiers found little protection in the wash and returned fire as they sought refuge behind a low embankment. In less than an hour, Major Wham realized the futility of continuing the skirmish. Although no one was killed, only 3 soldiers remained unscathed. He ordered his men back beyond the line of fire. The bandits giddily scurried down their lofty perch to claim their ill-gotten fortune. They quickly cut the mules' tangled harnesses and chased them away, leaving the wounded soldiers stranded in the middle of the desert. Locating their prize, they hacked open the strong box, grabbed the treasury bags, and fled. Laughter rang out as the gunmen scattered. Tracks split across the desert with some leading directly toward local ranches, including the Follett Ranch. According to one newspaper report, more than 1,700 soldiers and Indian scouts set out in search of the payroll bandits. The trails confused the posse as some of the bandits reversed their horses' shoes, making it appear as if they were riding toward the robbery instead of away. In addition, a band of wild horses had recently passed this way, leaving thousands of footprints. The robbery was without parallel of the history of crime in Arizona, reported the Arizona Daily Citizen. Although seriously encumbered by the weight of money, the bandits, are evidently making rapid marches across the mountains, probably trying to get to Mexico. Because this was a federal crime, U.S. Marshal William Kidder Meade, chief federal law officer in southern Arizona, headed the investigation. Federal agencies, as well as the governor of Arizona, offered numerous rewards for each man caught, enough incentive to round up a slew of suspects. More than a dozen men were initially arrested and accused of taking part in the robbery. The St. John's Herald protested that all the Mormons in Graham County had been apprehended. After the dust settled and a handful of men were released for lack of evidence, 7 local cattlemen remained behind bars charged with the robbery of the Army payroll. Public opinion favored the defendants. They were seen as innocent farmers and ranchers who were being persecuted by an overbearing government. Some saw them as latter-day Robin Hoods. On September 20th, 1889, the Arizona Territorial Court for the First Judicial District in Tucson convened. By October 2nd, they had handed down indictments against all 7 defendants for robbing the Army payroll. All entered pleas of not guilty. The trial commenced on November 11th. Yeah, it was a dangerous job. Yeah. Over 100 witnesses were called, more than half testifying for the defense. Everyone had an alibi and a witness to back them up, as the Arizona Journal-Miner reported. If the witnesses for the defense are to be believed, it was a fellow named Alibi that robbed the paymaster last May. Buffalo soldiers identified several other defendants as the culprits who fired down from the barricades, but their testimony was tainted by the color of their skin. A black woman, Frankie Campbell, claimed she came upon the cattlemen as they were struggling to move the boulder onto the road. She said she witnessed the entire melee from behind the huge boulder, even sustaining bullet holes in her clothing. She identified most of the bandits by name. One of the robbers lost a finger in the melee. Lyman Follett showed up in court missing a finger. Gilbert Webb, who was the only man able to pay his bail and remained free until trial, was accused of bribing witnesses. While out on bail, he paid off some of his debts in gold coins. The air was filled with accusations and charges, bribery, and falsehoods. Judges and lawyers came and went as each side accused the other of collusion and deceit, but on December 10th, 1889, it was all over. The jurors were handed the case on December 14th, and within 2 hours, including a lunch break, the jury of 12 free white men returned to the courtroom and acquitted the 7 cattlemen of any wrongdoing. No one was ever convicted of robbing the Army payroll. Little changed in the tiny hamlet of Pima, Arizona Territory. Gilbert Webb lost his home over unpaid taxes, but he eventually reinstated into the Mormon Church and served as a delegate to the Territorial Democratic Convention in 1890. Wilford Webb, or W.T. as he was now called, entered politics, serving as Speaker of the Arizona House of Representatives and member of the Arizona Constitutional Convention. His spread, the 76 Ranch, was eventually turned into a dude ranch. Andy Carlson, the wide-eyed teenager who held the horse's reins as the robbery unfolded, remained a cowboy all his life. The other acquitted men fell in and out of law, but no one ever admitted any part of the Wham payroll robbery. Speculation still abounds as to whether the bulk of the Army money may be stashed somewhere near the town of Pima, but in all probability, it is long gone. Of the dozen Buffalo soldiers who defended the Army payroll, 2 were awarded the Medal of Honor and 8 received commendations from the military. One of the dozen Buffalo soldiers who defended the Army payroll, 2 were awarded the Medal of Honor and received... Okay, I already did that. Major Wham, initially charged with replacing the funds lost on his watch, eventually was released from his financial burden by Congress. In his later years, W.T. Webb was often asked if he had any part in the heist. His reply was never wavered. Quote, I neither confirm nor deny any involvement. To confirm would be to admit my guilt, but to deny would surely ruin a good story. Yeah, yeah, I think that too. All right, well, that's the end of that one. What's up, Luke Mitchell? What's happening, bro? Professional paranormal research. What's happening? If you guys, any mods want to drop links, you guys are more than welcome to do that for everybody's channel. Yeah. We do have another one here. We'll go ahead and get right into it. This one is Agustin Chacon. Hombre muy malo. Is a very bad man. On the evening of December 18th, 1895, Paul Becker, a clerk tending Mrs. McCormick's store in southern Arizona's Morenci Canyon, locked up and headed for the local saloon to grab a bite to eat. Three men watched him leave. Agustin Chacon, Pilar Franco, and Leonardo Morales climbed through a transom at the rear of the store looking for money, guns, and food. Anything they could steal. After Becker had his fill at the saloon, he headed back to McCormick's and walked in on the bandits. They ordered him to open the store safe. Becker lunged at the trio, knocking the gun out of one man's hand and grabbing for a knife held by another. The knife sliced across Becker's hand. They again demanded he open the safe, and again Becker refused. According to Becker's later statement, Augustine Chacon then plunged his knife into the clerk's side and left him for dead. The three men left the way they came, richer by a mere $25 and two watches. Becker staggered back to the saloon where Constable Alex Davis removed the 6-inch knife still stuck in his side. Augustine Chacon, a man who admitted to killing over 50 men during his lifetime, had struck fear around Morenci and across most of southern Arizona, long before he entered the McCormick store that night. All while his life did not start out on the wrong side of the law, he ended up on the wrong end of a hangman's noose. Hey, thanks, K-Man. I appreciate it, man. Yeah, this one looks like it's gonna be a good story here. Born in Sonora, Mexico around 1856, Chacon claimed he worked as a farmhand and vaquero, which they call a cowboy, even hiring on for a while with the Mexican Border Patrol. Around 1888, he arrived in Morenci and was hired as a cowboy on Ben Alney's ranch. Over 6 feet tall. Okay, hold on. Here's his picture. Agustin Chacon, the hairy one. Over 6 feet tall with a mass of black hair covering his body, including a voluminous beard and mustache, he aptly fit his nickname El Peludo, or the hairy one. El Peludo. Chacon earned the respect of his compadres on the ranch, and his boss found no fault with his work until the day Chacon disputed the size of his paycheck and quit. Chacon and Alney exchanged heated words, and at one point, Alney purportedly laughed in Chacon's face. Alney drew his gun, but was no match for the wily cowboy. When the smoke cleared, the rancher lay dying in the dust. Ranch hands raced to his rescue, but 5 cowboys also met their fate at the end of Chacon's gun. Chacon hightailed it into the hills with a posse in hot pursuit. They quickly caught up with him. Chacon knew if he could not outrun a posse, he could certainly outshoot them. He could forward before a bullet smacked into his arm, yet he still managed to escape. Chacon eluded the law for several months until someone recognized him one night near Fort Apache. He argued his innocence, but a vigilante group threw him in jail with the promise of a sunrise hanging. When the first streaks of dawn peered between the barred windows of Chacon's cell, only a pile of hacksaw blades and a few sawed-out bars lay where the outlaw should have been sleeping. Some said Nellie Olney, the rancher's daughter who never believed Chacon murdered her father, provided the tools for his escape. Oh, excuse me. For the next few years, Chacon roamed back and forth across the Mexican border, earning his living by smuggling cattle and horses from one country to the other. He was back in Morenci by early 1894. One cold winter morning, two clerks who worked at the nearby Detroit Copper Company made camp at Eagle Creek to enjoy a few days of hunting and fishing. When a band of outlaws called upon them, the naive young men stood no chance. The bandits were after guns and ammunition and lost little time eliminating the campers to acquire their goods. No one witnessed the killings, but Chacon was the name Morenci citizens put to their merciless slayings. For a while, Chacon hung around the town of Tombstone, where outlaws and lawmen were often one and the same. It wasn't long before Cochise County Sheriff John Slaughter caught wind of Chacon's presence. Oh, it's another mention of John Slaughter there. Determined to bring him in, he and his deputy, Bert Alvord, found their man visiting friends in a large tent just outside of town. Alvord covered the front of the canvas building, Slaughter the back. As Chacon fled out the back way, Slaughter fired, certain he had hit his man, even though the night he was as black as El Peludo's heart. Slaughter noticed one of the tent guy's ropes had broken and assumed Chacon had fallen over it. I hate that shit. They didn't even word that right. They put tents guy ropes. Don't even make no sense. Dying as he rolled down a ravine running behind the tent. With lanterns lighting the way, the lawman headed down the abyss, but the ditch gave up nobody. Chacon had apparently tethered his horse below for a quick getaway. Unscathed, he probably tripped over the rope just as Slaughter fired. By now, Chacon had few places he felt safe, but for some reason he kept returning to Morenci. Then came the break-in at McCormick's store. The day after the robbery, Constable Davis, who was also a Graham County deputy sheriff, gathered a posse and followed the bandits' trail up a steep hill to a lowly cabin. From inside, Chacon watched the posse approach. Suddenly, he bolted out the door, quickly followed by Franco and Morales. Gunfire exploded across the hillside as the bandits took refuge behind a barrier of huge boulders. Eventually, Franco and Morales got their horses and headed down the hill. Several of the posse followed, killing both men as they fled. The war continued at the cabin. One member of the posse, Pablo Salcido, was a friend of Chacon's from their days as cowboys. Salcido convinced Davis he could talk Chacon into surrendering. He called to Chacon and Chacon invited him to come ahead. As Salcido advanced, Chacon stepped in the open and fired one shot, felling his friend with a bullet through the head. Damn. That didn't work out too well. A hail of gunfire rained down upon the killer. Spent shells outnumbered the scraggly wildflowers scattered across the barren hillside in the bloodiest gunfight in Morenzi's history. Suddenly, an eerie silence greeted the posse. Cautiously, they approached the boulder and found Chacon dazed with a bullet in his shoulder and a streak across his chest where another bullet had grazed him. Once again, El Palulu would be behind bars, but for how long? Chacon recuperated in the Solomonville jail, a facility the Arizona Republican ridiculed as the most insecure in the territory. Charged with the murder of Pablo Salcido, he wasted no time proving the newspaper article correct when he casually walked out of his cell one evening. Crouching in a nearby ditch, he waited for a chance to flee out of town. His freedom was short-lived, however, when one of the men looking for him tripped and fell into the ditch on top of him. On May 26, Chacon appeared before the Solomonville court and pled innocent to the killing of Pablo Salcido, claiming he would never shoot his friend. Despite his plea, he was convicted of murder and the hanging was set for July 24, 1896. To ensure he would still be around, he was sent to a more secure jail in Tucson until the date of his execution. Chacon appealed his case to the Supreme Court of Arizona Territory, but the initial verdict was upheld. A group of citizens opposing the death penalty petitioned he serve life in the Yuma Territorial Prison, but they were also turned down. One newspaper claimed there was a sentiment in Graham County amounting almost to a religious fervor against hanging Chacon. The delays extended his execution date to June 18, 1897, and as he was being escorted back to Solomonville, he managed to saw off his shackles, but his escape attempt was quickly thwarted. With only 9 days to go before he faced the gallows, Chacon seemed destined finally to die. But the hairy one had other ideas. No one knew where he acquired his supply of tools, but visiting friends probably brought them in piece by piece. A band of sympathetic Mexican prisoners supposedly played guitars and sang a selection of loud, lively songs as he cut his shackles, burrowed into the thick adobe wall of his cell, and sawed through broad beams embedded in the stone walls. When he finally broke through, he tumbled into the sheriff's office and sailed out the window, once again a free man. Boy, they sure couldn't contain him in them damn jails, could he? He was in and out, in and out, in and out. Just fuck. Hey, Cindy D, welcome to the channel. Welcome to my live stream. I appreciate you being here. For the next 5 years, Chacon hid out on both sides of the border. More than one unsolved crime was blamed on him, and he probably did commit his share, such as the 1899 murder of 2 men found in their home near New River. Their house ransacked and robbed by a group of marauders. The posse that trailed the culprits through Pinal County into Globe, then along the Black River, garnered a description of the men from the ranchers they passed. One of the desperados certainly fit Chacon's hairy countenance, but the killers were never caught. In the late 1800s, as the country expanded westward and territories attained statehood, Arizona Territory was repeatedly rejected in its bid for sovereignty. A major detriment facing Arizona was its reputation as a place where outlaws could still find refuge. In 1901, Territorial Governor Nathan Oakes Murphy organized the Arizona Rangers to enforce territorial law. Range boss Burton C. Mossman became the first captain of this new breed of lawmen during his one-year term. He and his men eliminated some of the most notorious outlaw gangs in the territory. Mossman was determined to bring in Agustin Chacon before his term was up. By now, Chacon only came into Arizona when he needed to sell off rustled Mexican cattle or horses. In April 1902, Mossman recorded recruited 2 lawmen turned outlaws to help him capture Chacon. Ex-Deputy Constable Billy Stiles and Bert Alvord, the man who had once tried to capture Chacon with Sheriff Slaughter. Mossman promised leniency for the 2 scoundrels if they helped with his plot. They were to contact Chacon at his Mexican hideout and entice him to cross the border into Arizona. That doesn't sound like it's a good idea since he shot at his own friend just a little while ago. Yeah, that don't seem like that's going to end too well. Since Arizona Rangers had no authority in Mexico, he needed to get Chacon into the U.S. before he could arrest him. Mossman posed as an escaped horse thief who desired some of rancher Colonel Bill Green's fine racehorses located just the side of the U.S.-Mexican border, but he wanted Chacon to sell the herd in Mexico. After sending the 2 reprobates into Mexico to contact Chacon, Mossman waited to see if the killer would take the bait. It was 4 months before he heard from his accomplices. On August 31st, Stiles met Mossman in the border town of Naco and handed the ranger a note from Alvord saying Chacon agreed to a meeting 25 miles within the Mexican line at the Socorro Mountain Spring. Mossman was not eager to cross into Mexico, well aware that if a Mexican patrol caught him arresting one of its citizens within its borders, he would be in deep trouble. But he was determined to get his man, so he and Stiles headed south. 3 days later, they met up with Chacon and Alvord. Chacon was a reluctant host. His eyes never left the stranger who promised him good horse flesh. As Mossman, Alvord, and Stiles drank whiskey and exchanged small talk during the night, Chacon remained sober and silent. A drizzling rain left the men cold and uncomfortable. Although Mossman had the protection of his yellow rain slicker, beneath it his hand never left the hilt of his gun. The next morning, Mossman warmed himself by the fire. He pulled out a smoldering twig, bowed his head against the morning breeze, and breathed deeply to ignite his tightly rolled cigarette. He glanced over at Chacon, and there was no question in Mossman's mind who was in charge around this campfire. He willed himself to make no suspect moves that would anger his smoking partner. He had one chance to get the drop on Chacon. If he faltered, he would be dead before his cigarette hit the ground. Alvord saddled his horse, saying he would bring back fresh water. He had no intention of returning. Wiping his brow, Mossman realized it was not the morning rain drizzling down his face, but his own sweat. Yeah, no it doesn't. No, it sure doesn't. Hey, Laren Directo, welcome. It's quite a stream last night. I really enjoyed that. That was very nice. Maybe one of these days I can learn to play guitar myself. I'd always thought about playing an acoustic guitar, just never been able to acquire a guitar. But it would be cool though, to play guitar, you know what I mean? And sing some songs or whatever. Yeah, 12 thumbs up. The 3 men rode out of camp with Stiles in the lead, holding the reins of Chacon's horse. Chacon traveled with a rope around his neck and his hands cuffed behind his back. Mossman watched his back for any signs of a Mexican patrol. His 1-year commission as an Arizona Ranger had just expired. Once in the U.S., Mossman flagged down a train heading into Benson for the final leg of the trip. Graham County Sheriff Jim Parks met the entourage with a new pair of handcuffs for Chacon and a set of leg irons. A reporter on the train noted the haggard face of the 46-year-old bandit. His form is bent and his beard is tinged with gray. To be hunted like a wild animal for 5 years has left its mark on the outlaw. When asked where he was going, Chacon remarked, "I suppose they are taking me to Solomonville, and I want them to kill me this time." I prefer death to a term in the penitentiary. When the reporter asked Mossman where he had captured Chacon, Mossman replied, on a horse pasture located about 7 miles this side of the Mexican line. Mossman and Sheriff Parks must have had a few moments to get their story straight because Parks backed up the lie. Guards were posted outside the Solomonville jail, which had undergone a few changes since Chacon's last visit, including a new steel cage made just for him. However, the same gallows built in 1897 still waited. Ensconced, ensconced, I guess I'm pronouncing that right, behind a 14-foot adobe wall to keep out the curious. Only those with invitations will be allowed to view the hanging. The execution was scheduled for November 14, 1902, but once again a citizens group petitioned to commute the sentence to life imprisonment, and once again the argument was defeated. The date of the hanging was changed to November 21st, Black Friday. Chacon ate a hearty breakfast the morning of his execution, then visited with friends Sisto Molino and Jesus Bustos. He talked to the local Catholic priest several times during the day and finished off a big lunch. He put on a new black suit and shaved off his scraggly beard but left his dropping mustache intact. At 2 p.m., he headed toward the gallows. As he entered the courtyard, about 50 people greeted him. Eventually, even more climbed nearby trees for a glimpse of El Peludo. He made his way up the steps of the gallows, passing the coffin that awaited him. Chacon asked if he could have a cup of coffee and a cigarette before dying. He turned to the crowd and spoke to them in Spanish with an interpreter repeating his words. It is nothing but right that when one is going to die, that he be given a few moments of time to quietly smoke a cigarette. For 30 minutes he rambled on, once again swearing his innocence in the shooting of Pablo Salcido. I have a clean conscience, he said. Raising his right hand, he swore, I am sure that this hand has never been guilty of murder. I may have stolen and done a good many other things, but I am innocent of this crime. He asked for another cup of coffee, then sat down on the gallows steps to roll another cigarette and continue his conversation with the crowd. Finally, he was silent. Is that all? Asked the interpreter. Sí, es todo. Yes, that's all, Chacon replied. Friends climbed the gallows steps to shake his hand. He asked to be allowed to live until 3 p.m., but his request was denied. It's too late now, he said. Time to hang. He was pronounced dead 16 minutes later. Molino and Bustos carted off the body of their friend and buried him a few miles from Solomonville in San Jose. The Arizona Bulletin reported the next day, a nervier man than Agustin Chacon never walked to the gallows, and his hanging was a melodramatic spectacle that will never be forgotten by those who witnessed it. Many years after Chacon's hanging, historian Ryder Ridgway claimed he was giving a speech on outlaws in Oakland, California, when he noticed a stoic-looking man in the front row. The stranger showed little emotion as Ridgway talked until he mentioned the name Agustin Chacon. Suddenly the man was consumed with emotion, tears streaming down his face. As Ridgway concluded his speech, the man approached and bombarded him with questions about Chacon. Ridgway asked what interest the stranger had in the old outlaw, and the man said he was Chacon's son. His mother had kept the truth of his father's reputation from him, saying he had died in Solomonville during a smallpox epidemic. Now he knew the truth. Oh man, this kid's mother lied to a man about that, and that's fucked up. That's one thing that's fucked up, man. It's when people split up and then they tell their kids or whatever, they tell them a lie about their other better half or whatever. That sucks, man. It really does. In 1980, some of Chacon's family members dedicated a marble gravestone to the outlaw at the San Jose Cemetery. On the marker, they inscribed the following words: Agustin Chacon. He lived life without fear. He faced death without fear. Hombre muy bravo. Muy bravo. Maybe he was muy bravo to some, but to most, he was the hombre muy malo. Very bad man. Ooh, we got two more. All right, that's the end of that one, folks. We have at least three stories left. One of the stories mentions the Bert Alvord, the man that was just in the story. Oh, that was quite the story. Man. Well.
At the University of Arizona, when we
Okay.
choose your path from more than 150 top-ranked degrees and certificate programs, in person, online, near you, the University of Arizona.
Well, I thank you guys. There's at least three more stories, which I hope to get done by at least tomorrow. It's tomorrow. Oh, it's Thursday. Yeah, ate your broccoli. He was blindsided. But, yeah, I do thank you guys very much for being here. Arthur's T. Hound, Baron Directo, Eat Your Broccoli. Hey, Posiwi, thank you for dropping in. I'm sorry. Luke Mitchell, Cindy D, the Paranormal Research, Realists, Cammed Up Caveman, and Emily. Thank you guys all for being here. You guys are very awesome. I do have a Cash App and a PayPal. Links in the About section of my channel if you guys are willing to donate anything. I do thank you guys very much. This is Jose G, the Lone Wolf of Arizona. And I thank you guys for tuning in. Bye.